Over the last 6 to 12 months, there has been one single focus of mine that has contributed to making progress more towards my goals than anything else, and not just business goals. This has helped me communicate with my wife better, parent my kids better, be a better leader. It's helped in a lot of different facets. And so if you're not achieving goals in any area of your life as quickly as you would like to, then you might find this useful because it's been very useful for me. My name is Brian Rice. I'm a full-time real estate investor. I document my journey here, selfishly for me and unselfishly for you, with the hopes that it can help make you some more money. So this one focus has been, for me, clearly defining terms and communicating only in the observable behavior. What do I mean by that? Well, what I've come to find is when a lot of us communicate, we use very amorphous language that could mean so many different things. And therefore, one person thinks they're communicating one thing, the other person thinks that they're on the receiving end of the communication, understanding another thing. And it's basically just two people making face noise at each other. And I want to give you a concrete example of what it is that I mean and why this has been useful for me. Earlier this week, I was coaching someone on my sales team, and it's a new hire. And we were talking about how he can make more optimal outbound dials. And a way that would be more optimal or to come across in a better fashion to home sellers is for him to sound more familiar when he's talking with someone. And so I said, hey, one thing that would really help is if you sounded more familiar. And so how I told him to do this, I said, well, imagine that the person that you're talking to is someone that you haven't seen for a very long time. And, now you're talking to them for the first time in years. Like, how would you sound? And so he practiced that, and it worked one or two times, but we notice after repetitive calls, after he would make repetitive dials, it would kind of taper off. And I think the reason for that is, as he's making a bunch of calls to prospective home sellers, if every time he doesn't immerse himself in the experience that the person he's talking to on the phone is not someone familiar that he knew in high school, then whatever he was doing just kind of fell off, right? His introduction wasn't as effective. And so I thought about that, and I asked myself, well, what is actually occurring when he's being familiar? How can we make this a little bit more tangible for him to grab onto so it's easier for him to put it into action? And I thought about it for a second, and then I told him, I said, hey, I think it's the upper inflection of your voice on this very specific word. And he tried it, and boom, he sounded very familiar, as though he was talking to someone that he hadn't talked to in years. And the difference is, now all he had to focus on is, hey, inflect your voice upwards on this very specific word, and you achieve the outcome of sounding familiar. And so he doesn't need to, pretend that every single person he's talking to is this familiar person from high school that he hasn't spoken to for a while. He has a very tangible, observable behavior that he can now execute, and it's just very simple. Hey, inflect your voice upwards on this one word. The reason why this works is because if I tell him, hey, be more familiar, it's just not everyone is going to know what to do. And if I tell 5 different people to be more familiar, they're probably going to do it in 5 different ways, and they might have different understandings of what that word actually means or how to accomplish it. But by me thinking of what the observable behavior is that is accomplishing the outcome that it is that we're after, it just makes things very clear. And now he's able to very simply inflect his voice up on that one word and achieve the outcome, and we can move on to the next thing. Here's another example that also happened this week within my team. I was having a conversation with someone on my team, and I said, hey, I need you to be more responsive to email. When our clients communicate with us, we get sent an email notification, and it's very important that we respond to our clients immediately. And so I need to make sure that you see the notification. So when you get an email, I need to make sure that you're responsive. Well, the challenge is we had had a similar discussion before, and we had talked about trying a few different things, but we were back at the same place and discussing it again. And I think why this is such a concrete example is I can tell anyone, hey, I need you to be more responsive to email, but that doesn't give someone a directive. Someone doesn't know how to behave when I say, hey, I need you to be more responsive. And so in the moment, what I did is I asked myself, well, what are the actual behaviors that I do in order for me to make sure that I'm very responsive when it comes to email? What is it that I do? And here's what I said. I said, well, what I do is one, I eliminate all notifications from my phone from any useless apps like social media, Facebook, Instagram, any like weather apps, literally anything on my phone that is not something I might need to respond to quickly because it is a client, then I shut off the notification. And he was like, yeah, that would actually be really helpful. And he showed me his phone, and there was just notification after notification. And so it becomes this thing where when you get a notification on your phone, you just ignore it because you get so many. Well, what helped me is I eliminate all of them so that only the ones that I get are the ones that I need to take action on. And then I said, another thing that happens every time I get an email is my phone vibrates. And so if it's during business hours, a time where I would need to respond to a client when they reach out to me, and my phone vibrates, the vibration triggers me to check it to make sure that it's not a client. And if it's not, I can continue on with what I'm doing. If it is, then I can take a second, stop what I'm doing, and make sure that I give the client my attention. I said another thing that I do is when I sit at my computer and I'm working, I will leave the email application open during business hours. That way, if we do get some sort of client communication, then I get a notification immediately on my MacBook and that mail app is open. And why that was particularly useful, because we had had a discussion before, and his solution was, well, I just need to make sure that I check my email more frequently. Maybe I need to put on my calendar as a reminder to check my email more frequently. And maybe that could work. But again, for me, what I did is I just leave the mail application open so that when I get an email, I quickly check it and can make sure that it's not a client who needs attention. And then so now I have two different mechanisms, a vibration on my phone or a notification on my phone, of which only I get that are important to me, and I leave the mail app. And so when I get an email, I can check it real quick, see if it's action I need to take. If not, then I continue with what I'm doing. If it is, that I can make sure I stop and give the client attention. And side note, another thing I did that I think was really helpful is when that conversation was over, I recapped everything I said that I did that helped me make sure that I'm responsive in email, and I put it in writing for the team member to be able to see so that he could refer back to and use it if he needed in reference in the future. And I think this is actually an important step because I think we talk with our teams a lot about things that might need to happen, but if no specific notes are taken or the direction is not given in writing, then it's like, did it really occur? And then, it's easy for the understanding to get mixed up. But if it's in writing and it's clearly written, then it's very clear and it can be useful for your team. And this might sound very simple to you, but I've just found it so incredibly helpful to define everything that we're trying to accomplish in a behavior that is observable, because then it's very, very clear what it is that we're communicating, what needs to happen. And again, if I tell someone to be more responsive in email, or I tell someone to, hey, sound more familiar on the phone, people don't know what to do. And so just constantly training my own brain on, okay, what actually occurs in order to sound more familiar, and let me communicate that, or what actually occurs in order for me to be responsive in email and communicate that, has just provided a lot more utility for me. Now, another large benefit that I have gotten from defining everything in terms of an observable behavior is it gets rid of any narratives that we tell ourselves that are really not self-serving. And so, for example, back in March, I went to a business workshop. And one of the things that the people at that workshop suggested to me is that I make my organic content tailored specifically towards my end customer. And I wasn't doing that because I had some sort of belief that my end customer wasn't consuming my organic content. And I left that workshop and I tried it for a little bit and I wasn't happy with the results that I got. And so I reverted back to this narrative that I told myself that they're not there and they're not watching. And then I kept doing what it is that I was doing before. And 2 weeks ago, I went back to the workshop to continue to focus on my business. And someone at the workshop asked me, well, how is that going? And I told him, hey, I tried for a little bit. And he looked at me and was like, so what, you made like 30 posts? And I said, well, yeah. And he's like, well, nothing, is going to work with 30 repetitions. Like, do it 100 times and see if it works. And what I like about that is, again, the observable behavior that I should have walked away with in the original workshop in March is just defined very clearly. Okay, I'm going to go make content, organic content for my specific audience. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it, 100 shots on goal. And after 100, I'll have some good feedback. And had that been my sole focus of the observable behavior that needed to occur, it would have eliminated the narrative creep that comes back into my brain telling me why it's not working and essentially just giving me an excuse of why I can just revert back to what I was doing prior. And it just completely eliminates all of that narrative. And I think one big reason that has been useful for me is it's very easy for us to come up with some sort of narrative as to why something is occurring. But in all reality, what I've realized more and more is I don't actually know why things are occurring. I might come up with a story that's convenient for me or that, feels like it makes sense because of whatever reason. But there's no way I can actually know why something has occurred unless I do some sort of test with a control and then I change a variable. And it just, my ability to divert my focus completely away for why something has occurred just into, well, if I do X, then Y occurs. And then I can completely focus my attention on, okay, that means I want Y. What are the actions that will increase the likelihood that I get closer to Y? And then just focus exclusively on those actions and not worry about, what reasons something might be occurring. That has just been so incredibly useful for me. And so again, to relate this to the example that I just shared, well, I made 30 posts and people, they're not doing well because my end consumer is not on the social media platform where I'm posting. There's no way I could actually know that unless I developed this big experiment and I did significant volume and I could try to test it. Now it is a hypothesis, but it doesn't serve me telling myself that narrative, right? And so just focusing on what is the desired outcome that I want and what are the actions that will increase the likelihood most that I get the desired outcome, and then just focus on that. And I'll close with this. Something I've noticed is if I try to communicate in only observable behavior or very clearly defined terms like this, where we're with someone or maybe even a group of people who aren't pursuing hard things or aren't pursuing similar goals to me, a lot of times the response I get is, like I have three heads. And I've reflected on why that might be. And honestly, what that tells me is that the quality of my conversations can be a really good indicator of whether or not I want certain people around me, whether or not I want to continue to communicate with certain people. And that in and of itself has been challenging for me because if I am constantly striving to improve, but people who I am used to or regularly communicate with aren't constantly striving to improve, and those are people who you were once close with, then it can feel really guilty not wanting to communicate with them or not wanting to be around them. And I constantly have to tell myself or remind myself, what's more important? what it is that those people think about me or me getting closer to my goals. And the answer is always me getting closer to my goals. And so I bring that up because as I continue to communicate with more and more people who are ahead of me, they all seem to have in common that our conversations are just more clear. And they're about the path that we're on, and they're about what future that we want for ourselves and who we're becoming. And as we talk about that, it's just easier to talk about those things if the definition of terms is very clear, if we're communicating in observable behavior. And so when you talk like that with someone who's not focused on becoming better or improving, I've noticed it's just, you feel like you're leaving them behind. And while that's tough, what would be tougher for me is not achieving what it is that I want or get to where it is that I want to go. So anyhow, this has been top of mind for me, so I wanted to make this. It's been something I've been thinking a lot about, and I hope you found some value in hearing it. And if you did, it would mean a ton if you shared it. That's the only way that this podcast grows. And by the way, I have never done this on here before, but I was thinking about this earlier this week and how I can continue to engage with you guys more. I have opened up one spot on my calendar to help one individual get closer to where it is they want to go. It could be with real estate, with your business, with health and fitness, whatever you're looking to accomplish. And if you are interested in getting some one-on-one help from me, go to my Instagram at the Ryan Rice, send me a DM. And if we think we're a good fit for each other, then we can see what that would look like. I'm literally only going to do this with one slot on my calendar right now because I owe it to my business for that to be my focus. But I've been thinking about how I can engage more with some of you. And, yes, even though it's only one slot and it may not seem like a ton of time commitment, for this to be fair to my business, this is something I would charge for. It's not going to be free. And anyways, if that interests you, message me on Instagram at the Ryan Rice. We can see if it'd be a good fit. And if it doesn't, then that's cool. I'll keep putting out this free stuff for you guys. And I hope it continues to help. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.